So we made it back from Virginia safe and sound. The 182 performed great. Love this airplane. A couple little squawks we have to get taken care of, but we are very happy to be home. Had a great trip. But this video is about the fact that, even with all of the experience that I have and that Dana has, pilots still make mistakes. It was not a perfect flight. I had a couple situations on the flight that I probably could have handled a little better. So I'm going to be honest with you guys and talk about that. And I want you to know that every pilot keeps learning throughout our whole flying journey. And the day that I stop learning, the day that I stop trying to do better, is the day I should stop doing this. And I'm not ready to stop doing this. So let's dive into it. We departed Craig at about 9 a.m. on Friday, November 29th. I filed IFR because there were broken to overcast clouds with bases at around 2,000 feet for the first 50 miles of the trip. The flight was uneventful, but my approach to runway 36 at Myrtle Beach that morning set the stage for me to make a mistake during my approach to that same runway 3 days later. I was on an IFR flight plan, but the weather at Myrtle Beach was clear, so ATC cleared me for a visual approach. That meant I could proceed visually to the airport and land with no minimum altitude restrictions. On Monday morning, the sky was clear all the way from Norfolk to Jacksonville, but climbing to an IFR altitude meant a stronger headwind component. So we cruised under VFR at 3,000 feet. I got flight following from Norfolk to Myrtle Beach, which would once again be our fuel stop and a lunch break. As I began my descent toward Myrtle Beach, the approach controller issued the following instruction.
November 52587, maintain VFR at or above 1,700 until you're established straight in on final. And you can enter a right base runway 36.
Right base for 36, 52587 at or above 1,700.
November 52587, contact Myrtle Beach Tower on 128.45. Have a good one.
Port Tower, thanks, 52587. Myrtle Beach Tower, Skylane 52587 over the shoreline on a right base for 36.
587 mile tower and 36 shoreline.
Clear to land runway 36, 52587.
So a few things to unpack here. Clearly, I didn't read back ATC's instruction verbatim, and that was a mistake. I read back what I thought I heard, which was maintain 1700 on the base leg, but once on final, and she cleared me for landing, I thought I could descend at my discretion toward the runway. This was very similar to, in my mind, when I was cleared for the visual approach on Friday on the IFR flight plan, but obviously that's not what they meant, and I should have clarified with the controller.
November 587, turn left at Bravo 2.
Left on Bravo 2, 52587.
587, one approach switch you over. Did they give you an altitude restriction at all?
Did you notice how the controller didn't say anything to me as I was descending toward the runway? She didn't mention anything about it until I was taxiing clear of the runway. And I heard her, but I didn't respond right away. It was after I had switched over to ground that the ground controller informed me of the situation. And here's what he said.
587 off 36, Bravo 2, taxi to the FBO.
November 52587, ground. Quick question. When you were switched to tower coming in from approach, were you given the restriction maintain VFR at 1,700 to establish on a straight and final?
No, I thought that they said make 1,700 until you were on the base. I apologize.
November 52587, standard here is at or above 17. The reason why, their sightseeing helicopters run all along the shoreline from the airport northeastbound. So they'll fly up to 1,200 feet. So the 1,700s to keep you clear of the helicopters. We didn't have any issues today, but for the next time you fly into Myrtle, just keep that in the pocket that there's a lot of helicopters on and around, usually up to 15 of them.
Okay, good to know. Thank you so much, 587.
587, straight across Bravo, taxiing to the ramp.
Straight across to the ramp, 587.
Okay, so now I find out why there was the altitude restriction in the first place. It was due to helicopters operating northeast of the airport. Okay, fine. But check this out. If you look at the chart supplement entry, aka the airport facility directory for Myrtle Beach International, and I'll put it up in the corner of the screen here, it says sightseeing helicopters operating in close proximity of the airport and runway at or below 1,200 feet. Okay, that's fine, but it doesn't say specifically northeast of the airport or along the shoreline. It doesn't say anything about a recommendation to maintain 1,700 feet until you're on final approach to runway 36 because of the helicopters. All of that could be useful information if that is indeed their standard procedure. It would probably be helpful for the FAA to publish that in the chart supplement. I think it's also worth noting that Myrtle Beach International is a Class Charlie airport, which means the tower has ATC radar capability. The controller who cleared me to land on runway 36 would have known about any helicopters operating in my vicinity and could have told me about them. I was VFR and looking for traffic the entire time, and also I did not observe any targets on my ADS-B traffic display. Again, I'm not excusing my mistake, but I think ATC does share some responsibility in this particular situation. So I thought to myself after the fact, what would it mean to be at 1,700 feet on final? In what other circumstance am I at 1,700 feet AGL on final approach? Well, this is approximately the altitude you might be at the final approach fix on an instrument approach. And at that altitude, you're several miles away from the runway. So runway 36 at Myrtle Beach pretty much butts up right to the coastline. So to be at 1,700 feet on a stabilized approach on final to that runway, you're going to be a couple miles offshore. I don't like being a couple miles offshore down low in a single engine airplane. I'm just not a huge fan of that. Now, if I had to actually fly the ILS approach to runway 36 at Myrtle Beach, which I didn't because the weather was good, but if I did, yeah, I would find myself in that situation where I would be a little bit uncomfortably offshore at a low altitude. But I wasn't. I was VFR arriving from the north. So to me, it just didn't make any sense to drag myself out on that long of a final in order to have a stabilized approach to the runway. If I had held 1,700 feet per the instruction until I was established on the final approach, but kept myself closer to the runway, I would have been super high. And, you know, the runway there is pretty long, but that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to be that high on a short final and then have to dive bomb down to the runway just to avoid the helicopters. There's got to be a better way. So the other mistake I made on this flight was not recognizing that there was a developing situation of having a quartering tailwind on final approach to runway 5 at Norfolk. So I was getting vectored around by Norfolk approach for runway 5. The winds reported at the surface were relatively calm, so I wasn't really expecting a whole lot.
Norfolk Tower, Skylane 52587 on a right base for 5 following the citation.
Skylane 52587, Norfolk Tower, winds calm, runway 5, clear to land.
Clear to land 52587.
But the guy ahead of me landing was a business jet, and so I had him in sight. I was actually more concerned with wake turbulence, but he was far enough ahead of me that wasn't going to be a factor. But he ended up going around, and it didn't occur to me at the moment to ask myself why. I just noticed that he went around, and then I'm coming in on final, everything is fine, and I get down low toward the runway, and it was a fairly hard landing, and I felt like just something wasn't right, but I got it down fine. It wasn't a horrible landing, but it just wasn't one that I was particularly proud of. And after we cleared the runway, Dana looked at the windsock and looked at me, and he's like, Mare, that was actually a little bit of a quartering tailwind. No wonder that landing wasn't so great. And then I thought to myself, well, maybe that's why the jet went around. But normally, if they encounter something like that, they will make an announcement to ATC. He didn't have to, but that would have been useful information. And on me, you know, I probably should have paid more attention to the windsock and not gotten complacent thinking that the wind was relatively calm. I didn't feel a whole lot of wind on final. There wasn't a whole lot of crosswind. So I think I let my guard down a little bit on the wind situation. So note to self, always check the windsock because you don't want to end up with a tailwind. So now that I'm done beating myself up for all the things that I feel I screwed up on that trip to Virginia, I want to acknowledge the things that I think I did well, how I exemplified AQP principles in our flight. So the first thing is just managing resources and using ATC effectively. Even though I interpreted a communication from ATC wrong, I feel like I did a good job using their services. So I'll give myself points for that. Second thing is managing passenger comfort. So Alex was sitting in the back seat. I think I did a good job of making sure that she was comfortable, packing blankets, and just managing her overall comfort, I think worked really well on this trip, because I was a bit nervous about it because it was going to be a bit chilly. And the last time we took a flight up to Virginia when it was cold outside, she was an absolute popsicle. So this time she was a lot more comfortable, so that went much better. And let's see, what else? Flying at altitudes and over locations where we always had a safe place to land. And that was one of the reasons why, you know, in retrospect, as I already mentioned, I wasn't super thrilled about having that long final approach into runway 36 at Myrtle Beach. I really like staying within glide distance of some place where I could put the plane down if for some reason the engine should falter. So I feel like I did a good job of doing that. And lastly, managing the weather. You know, we had a little bit of IFR departing Craig, but I felt super comfortable flying in IMC with high ceilings and getting above it to nice smooth air. So kudos to me for that, but nonetheless, some lessons learned and things I could do better next time. All right, guys, so here's the bottom line. AQP, Advanced Qualification Program, is all about learning from other people's mistakes so you don't make mistakes. I want you to learn from my mistake so you don't make the mistake that I made. And the other point is to keep learning. Listen, we've all got to really embrace this thing called general aviation and all do our part to stay on top of it and do the best we can every day. So I hope this video was helpful to you. If you haven't already, please like or subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. So in the next couple days, it's going to get warm outside again, and I plan on going to fly the Cub. And every time I go fly, whether it's the Cub or any other airplane, I always remember there are very important people in my life who are counting on me to get this airplane down safely and for me to get home safely. And that's really what AQP is all about. It's about doing good planning, always doing your best job so that you can get home to your loved ones. Wishing you all a very happy holiday season and happy flying.